We continue forward discussing the aftermath of the horrific assassination of Charlie Kirk and look at, again, I've shown you, I'm going to keep for any more, in case any more conservative people stumble across this, I am utterly opposed to people approving of or celebrating this act of violence and assassination. Stuff like this is terrible. Now, we have been comparing people with more power than just random people on campuses or online, but I still am disgusted by that. So, let's look at a random person. You saw a random, not influential, not elected official there in the cheering that chant, which is horrible. Let's look at a random Trump supporter saying it's time for civil war, which I don't know, seems bad.
Mr. President, I implore you, call for a civil war. Call for a civil war and let us do our thing. Let us go door to door, street by street, and clean this country. Please, if you're watching this and you share the same sentiment, send it to Donald Trump. Share it on your page. Whatever. Get this message out there. This is not a joke. I'm a peaceful man. Time for peace is over. I'm willing to fight and I'm willing to die. We are all Charlie Kirk.
So, I have been in a lot of social settings with family and friends since Charlie Kirk was murdered. And I've had a lot of conversations with people like, wow, people I disagree with even politically. Wow, how can we take this as yet another reminder of what needs to be done for us to find some collective consciousness? What can we do to not erase our political differences because they matter so consequentially? And let's keep screaming at each other. Let's keep arguing. But is there anything we can change about how we do so, or how some people, who we listen to and who we don't, that could minimize the radicalization of people? That's some people's reaction. That's everyone I was talking to in person. And then I look online and it's like that. If you look at the random people going viral, again, I'm going to keep saying this. I know for our full show viewers, it's really repetitive, but this is for the YouTube segment viewers in case they didn't watch the other segments. You have to discern between people who are just going viral on social media and have no influence versus people who do. And we're not seeing mockery or anything like that from powerful Democrats. So please, MAGA, notice that. Because if you are being convinced that the Democratic Party loved this, you are being lied to. There are examples of way too many people, and I hate it. I really do. And I oppose it. And it inflames. So when I was diving into that world, not just focusing on the influential people, but the random people who are going viral and getting views with this stuff, so it is relevant-ish. It's like this guy versus the other guy I just showed you. And that's scary. When it feels like sometimes, despite probably this not being the case, but just what social media algorithms do, it feels like we're arguing between the first guy I showed you and this guy. Happy and civil war. Yay, violence and civil war. Now, my hope is DoorDash and Netflix will prevent a civil war. That maybe we would, these crazies online don't actually want, but it does manifest at least in individual acts of violence. But like for a whole civil war, that's a lot of work. And Americans sometimes don't have that level of motivation. That's kind of a lighthearted spin on it. But I am scared because it doesn't take a whole movement saying we're going to war to get more acts of violence. And I think everyone in this space is seeing an uptick in violent language directed at them. Because a lot of people online are only being shown the most outrageous examples of the other side's response. And right now, people like that guy believes it's time for war, which I think is bad. I do think we should be mindful of this meme, though. Chinese bots on one side and Russian bots on the other, poking the US and saying, come on, do a civil war. That guy was a real guy, but a lot of people that you're interacting with online that are saying terrible things, there is a good chance. They've run tests before on what percentage of X accounts are bots, and it's like a huge percentage. A lot of people you're engaging with are not real people, and they're just trying to infuriate you. So have more conversations with, I sound so self-helpy. I promise I'm not trying to be like, ooh, touch grass. But I really do think that go talk to a real human being in person, and maybe you'll feel a little bit more sane. Estimates on the percentage of bot accounts on X vary widely depending on the source and methodology. A 2024 study by Fifth Column AI analyzed 1.269 million accounts and estimated that approximately 64% might be bots. So it really is that. Bots being like, civil war. Now, I don't believe we're even close to that. And I don't like the civil war mongers. Fear mongers about civil war that always get clicks off of that. That's why I rarely am like, we're about to be there, because I don't believe it. But I do think more acts of violence could happen, more fringe individuals radicalized by videos like that. The New York Times reports civil war mentioned surge online after Kirk assassination. You know, I saw one thing and my heart really does break. I know Megyn Kelly knew Charlie Kirk personally. And as I keep saying, I hope this makes sense to everyone, but you have the event and the tragedy and the family and your sympathy. And as happens with nationally publicized, in this case, assassinations, pretty quickly, the world moves to the political debate about what it means, how we move forward. And Megyn Kelly, in discussing this, made a point that this kind of started with Obama, that Obama kind of racialized everything. Not because of that, because what he said, and that Trump is the antidote, you get it. And I was confused, and I'll show you, we'll do a little comparison, and I'll show you how Obama handled horrific, nationally witnessed death.
We don't feel like ourselves. We haven't felt like ourselves in a while. And I'm sorry to get political, but I'm just going to be honest. We haven't felt like ourselves since Barack Obama. I just think he was such a slick snake. You know, he was this affable guy who was like wearing good suits and looked the part and sounded the part and dressed the part, but was so divisive in his messaging. The left, they look at you like, when you say this, they don't know what you're talking about. It's like, because you don't pay attention to the other half of the country. You only pay attention to your absurd news sources, which spin and spin and spin to protect Democrats, especially if they're named Obama. He's the one who started to inject race where no one had been doing it. He's the one who started to use his pen and the phone to shove things down our throat that we didn't want. He's the one who shoved through an entitlement on our health care and our personal doctor visits that he promised he wouldn't mess with, and then he did, really hurting people, causing massive anger and open lies. He never missed an opportunity to twist the knife on the racial issue. He would do it subtly and in his own way, but it was very clear what he was doing.
He'd do this thing where he would go up and he'd bring race into the room in a way that it hadn't really been there. And he'd do this thing where he'd go up to the podium and he wouldn't say anything racial, but there would just be kind of this racial aesthetic. Does that make sense? There wouldn't be anything that he'd say, but he would twist the knife sort of with this racial aesthetic. Something that you were experiencing not through your ears, but your eyes would feel kind of like a racial, just a little racial jab. Now, I don't even know, again, in my heart, this happens to be a political point. I respond to political points, so we're talking about the politics of it. I really have only sympathy about what she's dealing with right now. But just to respond to the point itself, I'm not saying that she's trying to specifically say because he was black. I get that she would be very annoyed by that. But I think as she tries to explore the reasons why it felt so racial, maybe she should substantiate the argument a little bit better than that, because I didn't feel very compelled. Obamacare was bad. Okay, you can disagree with it. What did that do to our discourse, though, that was so horrible? He did a lot of things with executive orders. Have you seen Trump? And then she just keeps going back to the point that he racialized things. I'm just sort of, what?
Issue. He would do it subtly and in his own way, but it was very clear what he was doing. For the first time, we had a president who weighed in on legal cases before they'd played out. We never did that. That was a taboo that had never been crossed before him. And
I am almost certain that's not true. With every fiber of my being.
Donald Trump was the reason Barack Obama... reverse that. Barack Obama was the reason Donald Trump came about, that he was born as a political figure. They say Trump's divisive. He was the antidote. He was the answer to the divisiveness of Barack Obama. And we just haven't felt like ourselves for years now.
In the interest of sensitivity, let me just say it this way. If I were to be talking to Megan, do you get how that sounds weird? That Trump, who does all of the federal overreach things, 10x what you would say Obama did. I won't even get into the racialized stuff because y'all kind of turn your ears off with any of that. But that you haven't felt like yourself since him, who in our modern American moment is actually widely popular. I have a lot of problems with his presidency for my own reasons and specific policy changes I wish, and, his approach to different issues I wish he could have done better. But he's actually not a really divisive figure polling wise now. But there is a real motivated smaller section of the country that they do feel like it all started with Obama. So, you know what? Let me just explore it this way. One person said she's right. I remember when a right-wing racist slaughtered 9 black folks in Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina in 2015. Obama spoke with rage, called for war and blamed the entire Republican Party. At least that's how I remembered it. I mean, after all, he's black. We don't have to. But that was sarcasm. They were using sarcasm because this was Obama's message after a far-right white supremacist murdered black people for being black. And let's see if we find this to be a racialized, it was a racist attack, so there's some racial component to it, but divisive message.
That's how we lose our way again. It would be a refutation of the forgiveness expressed by those families if we merely slipped into old habits, whereby those who disagree with us are not merely wrong but bad, where we shout instead of listen, where we barricade ourselves behind preconceived notions or well-practiced cynicism. Reverend Pinckney once said, "Across the South, we have a deep appreciation of history. We haven't always had a deep appreciation of each other's history." What is true in the South is true for America. Clem understood that justice grows out of recognition of ourselves in each other. That my liberty depends on you being free too. That history can't be a sword to justify injustice or a shield against progress. but must be a manual for how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past, how to break the cycle, a roadway toward a better world. He knew that the path of grace involves an open mind.
So far we're hearing messages of seeing ourselves in each other, grace, forgiveness. Forgiveness. Just contrast that to, okay? But this was twisting the knife of racial hatred.
But more importantly, an open heart. That's what I felt this week. An open heart. That more than any particular policy or analysis, that's right, is what's called upon right now, I think. Yeah.
Think about an open heart. We have moved so far from calling on people to have an open heart after tragedy, to maybe try to find ourselves for the first time in our neighbors. And I'm not trying to be like, Obama, oh God. I'm just saying this demonstrates a little bit of the false telling of how we got to this moment. That it was somehow Obama making us all feel like not feeling like ourselves was the wording she used. There's so many, but again, out of the interest of sensitivity, not feeling like ourselves. But I'm not saying that. But you're setting it up. He was so racial. How he would just make things so racial. You couldn't even barely notice it the way I could, and we didn't feel like ourselves. When I looked at the office of the presidency, I just didn't see myself in the president, but not in a weird way. The funny thing is I grew up, like when I first came to consciousness about politics Obama was like, as a little kid, I was like 3rd grade when he got elected or something, or earlier, I think younger. So it's interesting when they talk about that, because in my head, Obama as a kid was just president. Like that is what president is. And so then that's a lot of my understanding of the presidency was characterized by his presidency. And I think while he was president, it's a little bit, I don't like when folks who are on Fox News trying to racialize everything all the time and trying to divide constantly about Obama's presidency, even down to the clothes he was wearing. When they go, he was divisive. It's like, maybe he could have been more uniting. I don't know. But all shorts don't have a place to talk about that.
What a friend of mine, the writer Marilyn Robinson, calls that reservoir of goodness, beyond and of another kind, that we are able to do each other in the ordinary cause of things. That reservoir of goodness. If we can find that grace, anything is possible. If we can tap that grace, everything can change. Amazing grace. Amazing grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I
just really divisive. It's like, what, we're just going to go around and grace each other? What, I'm just going to slap you in the face with grace? How's that going to work? What if I don't want your grace, you moron? Yeah, so I think people, and as I said, can't answer for every single thing that Obama did PR-wise. I do have an understanding of his policy record. And again, my own critiques. But if you play this game where you go, I actually think Trump was the solution to Obama's division, I think that you're lying. And I don't think that's helpful to us trying to tap into that reservoir of goodness, as he said. And I think having a president with his sense of obligation to a unifying message in times of difficulty would come in real handy right now.